Hi, everyone. So this is part two. In part one, we set up the very basic LaTeX file that was basically nothing but a title page and some headers. In this session, I'm going to run the first few lines of code and copy that code and results from the console in RStudio to LaTeX to a verbatim environment. For some of you, that was all perfectly clear, and for some, it was absolute gobbledygook, and hopefully it won't be by the time we're done. I may run a little over the 10 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it under 15, but I am going to make a few comments along the way because this is fairly basic, and so I want to take advantage of the time to make sure that nobody is lost. So, and I say that because I just was in a presentation by a senior scientific programmer at the Baylor College of Medicine, and she's the person who helps the doctors and the postdocs and the medical researchers at Baylor College of Medicine when they're putting together things for publication on these clinical studies. She helps them to put together all of the statistical stuff in presentations that look nice, the same stuff we're working on, and helps them with the statistics too. She's got a math degree and she said a physics degree and an electrical engineering degree. So somebody who knows a lot more about math than probably any of us. But somebody asked her if she resorts to Google or Stack Overflow, and she said, all the time. So number one, if you have to resort to Google or reading stuff on Stack Overflow, please don't think you're a dunderhead. You are doing what you're supposed to do. If you don't understand this, it's fine. Slow down. Look for help wherever you can find it, and go from there. She said that this is a partial quote. She said she does things like forgetting to put parentheses closed, which I actually did in part one, except with a bracket, not a parentheses. I did it with a curly bracket. She said we all have the same problems. It's just easier to identify them now. Meaning with experience. So a lot of those little typos, she gave the example that she had something where she copied and pasted some code into, I think it was actually RStudio, it might have been Python, but she copied and pasted that code, and one of the little quotation marks, instead of being the kind that it wanted, was one of the curly quotation marks that you see in like Microsoft Word. And so when it got in there, it threw an error, and she didn't see it. She actually took it to her boss, and he or she, I think it was a she also, pointed it out. So anyway, that's I thought that was an interesting story. So I may step back a little bit and make this even a little more basic, and throw some comments out that maybe will help. In case anybody has some of this basic stuff that you didn't quite get to start with, and you feel like if you raise your hand, you look bad. Trust me, you don't. You saw me mess two things up in the part one video, but I'm going to go ahead and get the million me's thing out of the way here and open up RStudio. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do is just run this, because I want to fill the environment up with some stuff. That didn't fill it up with as much as I wanted, but you can see there's some stuff in the environment. So the first thing you want to do, I'm going to clear out these plots because we're not going to need them. But the first thing you want to do when you're starting with new stuff, one of the options is you can use this little broom to sweep everything away. The other option is you can use that rm list command to sweep everything away. But what we're going to do, what's the best practice, is to open your project and I actually am already in this project, but I'm not going to save because I want to open it up clean. So I'm going to go find the project I want to open. And the project I want to open, the other reason I'm doing this is because this is the project you should be opening every time you work on a lab, and maybe when you work on the homeworks as well. You should see a directory that looks very much like this. Everything above it is unique to my computer, but this directory should match what your computer shows if you set up the project using GitHub. And so you get to that directory, you scroll down, you select this. You shouldn't have projects out in any of the other subdirectories. This is the one you need. When you open it, it should do something like that. And now your environment, which is this top right, where it says environment is empty, should be empty. Down here, your files will probably be wherever you were the last time you were in the project. You may not be out in the main directory, but the main directory is a good place to start. You can always navigate around to get to where you want to be. Where I want to be and where you're going to want to be, if you see any of this stuff, is in the demonstration directory, the presentations. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up this script that I have. And something I've mentioned recently, if you open up a script up here and you see a little yellow warning sign and something about packages not being loaded or packages not being installed, and it gives you the option to install them, that is just the simplest way to install them. And you probably will see some in this week's lab, unless you've been using R for a long time and happen to already have those installed, in which case you probably aren't even watching this video. So we're going to get that. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to back up and go to Text Studio. I want to get that file opened that we were using, and I can either go through the open recent, and there it is, it's sample LaTeX file 2, or I can go open and, I would drill down into the directory and find it, and it's this same directory that we're in our studio. And I want to get this one that's the sample 2. If you want to play around with it, I would suggest making one maybe called sample LaTeX file 3, or maybe sample LaTeX file in your name, and you can play around with it that way. So now I'm ready, and we already put in I've already put in the title stuff and the headers last time, and now what I'm going to do is I come down here and I'm in this new page, and just briefly a LaTeX thing, I've got it set for single spacing. I'm actually going to change that to double spacing just to make it a little easier to read. And my first section, I'm just going to call raw code, because that's what we're doing here. This is actually not fancy presentation stuff. This is just basic presentation, and we'll do a couple of really minor edits. Anytime I make any changes, I am in the habit of hitting save, because Text Studio doesn't auto save, or maybe it does, but it doesn't seem to do a very good job of it. So I hate losing things. So anytime I make changes, I save it. So coming back over here, this to RStudio, this is the console, the lower left-hand thing that when you start out, it probably says some things similar to this. It may not, you're probably actually still using an older version because it's updated several times since we started last fall. But it has all this stuff. And if you come up here to edit, the very bottom thing is clear console. You can also press Control L to achieve the same thing, at least in Windows. And I think that's probably the same in Mac, but it may be different. But it should at least the file menu should be the same or very similar. So you can come up here, and anytime I refer to the file menu, yeah, there's this, that's the file menu, but this whole thing up here is the menu or the file menu. It's the main menu bar. So you're going to go to Edit, Clear Console. And the reason I did that is because we're going to copy and paste the stuff from the console. So we didn't need any of that extra stuff. In the lab assignment, I asked you to copy and paste everything through line 19 because I'm working with different data and I put some comments in. It's actually going to go through line 23 in our case. I'm going to go through this a little bit step by step, but it will all appear down here in the console and we'll be able to copy and paste it in just a second. First of all, I want to load all the libraries. Hopefully all the libraries are installed, but in this lab, you may not have the PLM library or the PCSE library or one other library from later on may not be installed. And if you don't, you'll get that message up here and you can click install. Your second option is you can come down here and it's commented, but all you need to do is copy install packages, PLM, and you can either insert it as a line. You can either insert it as a line in your script, or you can just come down to the console and actually paste it. The other option is you can come, the third option is you can come to the console, type install packages, you type far enough to where it pops up and then you hit return and you've got your parentheses and then you want to start typing your package name. PLM is a really bad example because there we go. It takes a while for the thing to pop up and you need to wait for that to pop up before you hit enter because what that's going to do is put in those quotation marks. Without the quotation marks, it won't work. So you could just type it in and type quote PLM unquote. But if you type it and it's in the CRAN repository, it will add those quotation marks for you if you just type slowly enough. I don't need to install those, so I'm just going to run the libraries. Highlight what you want, run it, bam. That's done. We've got some stuff down here. It's not really important, but sometimes you might need to look at it. So I'm using data on non-democratic nations involved in militarized interstate disputes. That's Correlates of War project data. The data is from the Correlates of War data set. Additionally, there are variables from the Varieties of Democracy, VDEM project, and from Jeff Colgan's Revolutionary Leaders database. This is unbalanced panel data, so I won't be using the PLM package, and you'll see why in a minute. You may have noticed that line is very long, and I did that on purpose. You'll see why for that in a minute also. That's just commented stuff, but I do want it in the console output, so I am still going to highlight it and run it. So now I'm going to open my data. I'm doing this using the here command. The data is out in the data directory, so it's out here. It is this file all the way down here. And so the here library should, and the reader function should open it up. And there it is. We've got 2,221 observations of 202 variables. It's pretty typical. The first thing you do is do the view command, and that brings this up. It's a good idea to include this in your script instead of opening these manually. If it's something you're going to be working on between sessions or something you're going to be sharing or something, especially something you're going to work on long term, because you don't want to have to go in and manually open the file every time that you start working. So include that in your script. I noticed somebody that I was helping with some of their stuff, and I was just like, well, I'm going to run their script and see how it goes. And I ran their script, and all of a sudden I got, this error, and I'm like, what's going on? And I looked, and well, the data set wasn't loaded because it wasn't even in their script. I was kind of expecting that, maybe I hadn't changed the directory, but they were just loading it by hand. So And by hand, I mean clicking on that and saying import data set. I like to run this, which is the names command. You don't have to, but I do it because it helps with organizing and using the variables, because it gives me a long list. And so if I want a specific variable, I can look for it and I can copy and paste it. So I do that. It's just something I do. So the following part is going to produce an error because there are duplicates in this. Some of the countries, which is what the cow codes are, appear in multiple disputes in the same year because they have more than one war or dispute or battle going on. And so they show up multiple times in one year. It's okay because at this point, all I'm doing is demonstrating how to copy this console output to LaTeX. So we're just going to copy the error. We're not even going to worry about it. So I'm going to highlight that and run that. And there's this nice little error. And again, I don't care. But basically all that error was, I was able to produce this part, the P data frame part, but the PDIM command from the lab just won't work with my data unless I do something to clean it up that I don't want to do because it would make my data less valuable. So anyway, because I cleared out the console before, I don't have to go through and do this. I'm just going to do select all and copy. I'm going to come back over to LaTeX and I'm going to, there are a couple of ways you can do this. One is I can type begin verbatim. And because I'm using Text Studio, it fills a lot of that in for me. And there's this place that says content ... That's where I'm going to fill. All I have to do is paste. I did it with the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to do it again a second way, but you can see everything is there. I'm going to undo that and do it the second way. So I'll hit undo a couple of times, a few times, and get back to where I was. Again, Text Studio makes this really easy because I can come over here to LaTeX, and the LaTeX menu and the file menu. I can come to environments, and the verbatim environment is right there. I can delete that content thing and paste. Now, we did this before, compiling. Hopefully it's going to work. And I think it is. It is actually going to work. So we're okay there. It worked without any errors. It's possible you might get an error because of some of these special characters, like especially the $sign is a special character. If you get an error anytime because of some of these special characters, all you have to do is put a backslash in front of it. And that is called escaping it. If you were to look it up, the technical term is that you escaped the character. The technical term doesn't really matter. The main thing is you told Text Studio, you told LaTeX, the LaTeX compiler, to ignore that character and just to treat it as text and not as a command, because the $sign is actually what you use as telling it that it's a math function. So when you use the $sign, and hopefully it did it, and yeah, so it allowed me to create that beta. That's just sort of an aside. So what exactly is the last? There is one issue. And you remember I had those lines that were really, really long and they run off the edge of the page. Well, verbatim is going to actually do everything absolutely verbatim. It produces it just like it is when you copied it in. So all of those things, in order to fix that, there are two things you could do. One is you can fix it in RStudio before you ever get to that point. So I would come back up here to this and pick spots that are reasonable spots to put in line breaks. And hopefully, if I did that, then I'm going to run that. I'm going to just copy this part in and see if it solves the issue. And there are a lot of issues. I'm not going to show you fixing them all because there's no point in that. If you can fix one, you can fix them all. So that is this part. Let's see what I did exactly. So that's this part. Yeah, so that's everything down to where I said I won't be using the PLN package. So I can do that. That solves the problem. It solved the problem, well, and it actually didn't. So that's the other thing, is proofreading is important. It solved the problem in R. It looked like it was going to solve the problem and it didn't. But the other thing that you can do to solve the problem is you come out here, just hit enter. All you've got to do, so that was an issue, because I want it to look like R code. I can go ahead and put that little thingy in if I want to, but that's not necessarily necessary. But all of these things that ran over the edge, I can just go in, hit enter, and it's fine, because the verbatim package does just what it sounds like. It shows verbatim whatever you produced. And it's really good for presenting code. It's not really good for leaving in the main portion of your work. So the last thing I'm going to do is save that. I guess I already did that. So I've compiled it, I've saved it, and I'm going to stop recording and we'll get on to the next part.